Now we come to our first video here. How to deal with your students, how to make sure that you're all both on the same page. There's nothing worse than one person thinking, I have to do that, do I? And then the other person goes, I thought I had to do that. So this is a very good sort of introductory video for anyone that's sort of wondering, how do I supervise my students? What is expected of me? And conversely, what should the student do? What does the student bring to this equation? Policy is very important, okay? So a dissertation supervisor has several key policies and guidelines they must make a student aware of. So that's the learner handbook, the assessment and submission requirements, so deadlines, formatting, word limits, how the dissertation is graded, plagiarism and academic integrity policies, so proper citation, use of Turnitin or the equivalent, and the consequences of academic misconduct. Data management, confidentiality, GDPR, all that sort of stuff. How to store, backup, share data. Most universities use OneDrive, so I encourage my own students to use OneDrive, and we can share folders and work. And we can also track materials there. Very important in this age of AI that we have a sort of an audit trail of how the student developed their work. Procedures if problems arise, supervisor change requests, delays, extensions, all that sort of stuff. Libraries and digital resources, research databases, citation management tools like Zotero, access to statistical or methodological support services, writing and academic skills workshops offered by the university, more often than not by the library. Where to find mental health or well-being support, as dissertation stress can be significant. It's also good to highlight publication, intellectual property, copyright, all that sort of stuff. Now, the role of the supervisor, very important, okay? So guidance and mentorship, so topic selection, so helping the student choose a feasible, relevant and researchable topic. More often than not, the student will come to you with a research proposal already done, so you don't really have to deal with that. Oftentimes you have to deal with the consequences of that. Sometimes the research proposal is not feasible. They want to do mixed methods, but they don't have enough time to do it. They've chosen quantitative, but they've no idea how to use SPSS or any other type of statistical software. So you have to be careful there with that. Research design, advice on methodology, data collection methods and analysis techniques. Academic support, providing resources, so journals, tools relevant to the research. Oftentimes you draw upon your own experience there. Feedback on drafts, critique written work, ensuring clarity, structure and academic rigor, developing skills. So monitoring progress, very important. Timelines, making sure that they adhere to deadlines and milestones, so that they have chapter 1 completed by one particular time period, chapter 2 by another time period. You want to nip that in the bud early on, because you don't want a student that's on chapter 2 while your other students are on chapter 3 and 4. Regular meetings are very important. They can sometimes be a bit of a pain to try and organize. Everyone's timetables are different, trying to get everyone on the same page, but they do allow you to see if there's any problems that are going to appear down the road. Motivation and accountability are very important, and a lot of supervisors forget about it. I think it's good to encourage consistent efforts, that there's engagement there. Even just something as simple as going like, this is good work. There's a lot of stuff you have to do to fix it, but I'm happy where you are at the moment, and we can improve on it. Don't let them sink basically before it's too late. I know a lot of supervisors who are like, oh my god, this student is awful. It's like, well, what were you like at that point? You weren't great. I remember you from college. You weren't that great. So I think it's important to sort of temper expectations as well. Encourage constant, even if you do 10 minutes a day, it's still something. The longer you leave something, the worse it sort of gets. So I think it's always important, just keep some sort of progress log. Ethical and professional oversight, research ethics, guide on ethical issues, informed consent, other standards, plagiarism, proper citations, academic standards, ensure the work meets university's quality and integrity standards. So these are things you have to point out to a student to make sure that they're on the same page. Another important part of the process is evaluation and feedback. So you're providing formative feedback to improve work before submission. You want to make sure that the stuff you're seeing is not a surprise to you, that you're sort of keeping track of the student as you go along and saying, okay, here's a big mistake that you're doing. And in the later drafts you have, here's how you can fix it. Always keep on top of that sort of stuff. Just check in, don't say, yeah, hand me something up in a month's time, because damn well what you're going to get in a month's time if there isn't proper guidance week on week. Some sort of guidance week on week is important, even if it's just to say you need to improve your academic writing, or that's not how you reference. It's easier to fix 10 references early on than to fix 50 a month later. Emotional and career support is very important. They're not going to be students forever, and it's important to prepare them for the real world. Build up their confidence, offer professional advice. Most supervisors have some sort of career outside of college, especially in my experience. But any skills you have, pass them on, and that's why I mentioned transferable skills. Academic skills do not cease at graduation. They continue on. There's loads and loads and loads of stuff that can be transferred into your daily work life. Most people forget about it though. They just think, well, the dissertation is the final project and the final thing I'll ever look at. And it's like, that's ridiculous. It's like you're going to be working on development reports, company strategy, all that sort of stuff, especially if you're in the business world. If you're in the health world, you'll be working on policy and that sort of stuff. So bring those skills with you and encourage your students to recognize that. It's so easy for some students just to think, all the skills I'm learning here, I don't have to keep after this. I can forget, I can delete my memory. Don't delete your memory. UDL, I'll just pop this here. It's very important for any supervisor to know. A framework aimed at making learning accessible and effective for all students. The 3 principles: multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, multiple means of action and expression. So how do we apply that to dissertation supervision? Well, we have engagement, we have representation, and then we have action and expression, and we have some stuff there that you can have a look at. Everyone approaches work differently, and I think it's important to recognize that and to not be like, well, I had a student last year and they were very good, and now I have a student this year and they're not very good. It's like, it's much easier to think of them as just having different styles of engagement. How you approach each of those students, especially if you have international students, you can't really go too wrong. Now, show them the end goal, okay? The Simpsons thing is quite good at explaining this, where if you don't know what you're doing, you end up with a bananas looking dissertation that's just like, how the hell did this come together? And that's what, like, it's very helpful for supervisors to show their students what exactly they're working towards. So a lot of supervisors will just say, go to the library, get some books, and just do what they're doing. And it's like, no, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're not producing a book. Book is completely different from a dissertation. There's many students that go off and think, I have to write in this sort of ornate language. And oftentimes we think of a thesis as this mystical artifact that we summon somehow at the end of the research period. Like, it's very easy to complicate that process and the end product. So show them the skeleton of the chapters and the headings expected of them. They won't change that much from the other theses the college stores in their repository. And if a student follows a basic qual or quant format, then a basic template is already out there to follow. So again, I'll always state this: check other people's theses. Check other people's theses for reference to see what the standard is and what you need in your thesis. Here's my Oscar-worthy line here, okay? People who reinvent the wheel get run over by it, and the supervisor is the first to get run over. So here is the skeleton of a thesis. So very basic, bare bones. There will be some variation here, but more or less: title page, abstract, acknowledgements, table of contents, list of figures and tables if you're doing a quant, list of abbreviations, introduction chapter, literature review chapter, theoretical framework if it's not already in the literature review. Then you have a methods chapter, a results/findings chapter, discussion analysis chapter, conclusion recommendations, your references or your bibliography. If you don't know, references is every reference that's in the thesis only. A bibliography is everything you've read, but may not necessarily be referenced within the thesis. Then the last section of your dissertation will be the appendices. So that includes any ethical forms, the survey itself, the interview questions, If you use NVivo for qual, that goes in there, your coding methods. Now, dissertation management. So set clear expectations from the start. Explain the deadlines, the milestones, and the level of independence required. That is very important. You have to take the training wheels off the bike at some point for the student. You can't do the thesis for them. Create a timeline. Break down the dissertation into stages. So we saw that before. If you just show them, here, look, these are the building blocks. Again, schedule regular meetings, weekly or bi-weekly check-ins. They help track progress. You can spot danger or roadblocks coming a mile away, much easier to deal with. Provide examples and templates, so that's showing them dissertations in the repository. And encourage reflective practice. I always tell students to keep a diary of the research journey. Or just like if you're doing qual, just use a dictaphone, because you're going to be using it anyway to record your interviewees. So do yourself as well and say, oh, I had a really tough day today. My supervisor asked me to do this, this, and this. Maybe I'm doing things wrong. Or just use it to have a bit of a moan. Like, it really does help to have that sort of reflective practice in use. And I would encourage all supervisors to get their students to keep some sort of a diary of the progress. So now we've come to time management guidelines for supervisors, schedule regular check-ins. So we can see there a list of them. Again, it's just repetition from what I've said already, so it's nothing new there, but it's handy to have those little bullet points in your mind when you're going through it. And then here's the rest of them here. I use Excel to track progress. I think it's very handy. It's not for everyone, but I mean, it's an option for you if you want it. Avoid multitasking. Very important to focus on one chapter or task at a time. It's very easy for supervisors to panic and go, okay, look, let's do the findings and the discussion chapter at the same time, which means, and I do think sometimes when you see a discussion chapter that has all this new literature in it, when it's all should be in chapter 2, I always think, okay, that supervisor was doing two things at once. So what does scaffolded mean? Okay, so structured, timely, and supportive, guiding the learner step by step. So provide hints, prompts, or corrections during the learning process. Focus on helping the learner understand errors and improve, and often involves ongoing dialogue. Examples: making drafts with comments on structure and contents, using track changes there. Step-by-step guidance in data analysis or interpretation. Now there's some strengths to this. Builds confidence and understanding and helps students develop skills gradually. Again, as I mentioned before, it reduces the chance of persistent mistakes. You can spot roadblocks a mile away. There are some weaknesses to it though. It can create a dependency if overused. It does depend on the student though, and it may slow down independent problem solving. Also has its strengths and weaknesses. It's less frequent and more reflective, so it allows learners to self-assess and make decisions independently. So end of chapter or end of draft feedback, highlighting overall strengths and weaknesses. There's good and bads to that, obviously, which is, if you trust a student to do it, fair enough. Like if a student is an industry expert themselves, or they're coming back to education and bringing a wealth of experience with them, fair enough. But if it's the student's first time doing a dissertation, or they have been away from education for a long time period, they may do things in a sort of outdated manner, which may not gel well with the timeline. We can see here in some of the weaknesses, it can leave some learners unsure of how to improve. And then obviously the big one, risk of repeating mistakes without timely guidance. I'm going to spotlight here blended, and I don't mean blended learning, I mean a blend of the two. So scaffolded feedback, guided, formative, ongoing, best for building skills and confidence. Independent, as we saw, reflective, less frequent, best for promoting autonomy. So start with scaffolded feedback early in the dissertation to build competence, and then what you want is obviously a student then to take the initiative themselves. So just a little part here on portfolio. I mentioned OneDrive, so I'm sure a lot of people have used OneDrive in their place of work. It's pretty straightforward. And it just allows you to keep track of everything in the one place, that you're not sort of fiddling through multiple emails, well, chains of emails where things can definitely go missing. So it's just a handy way of tracking everything. And there's just a handy little table there on the portfolio overview. Now, obviously, an important one there is the exam board. So if a student has been accused of plagiarism or AI misuse, or generally just not been there, not been present. The OneDrive is a nice way of keeping track of everything that the student has done. So every single draft they've done, a OneDrive that's sort of empty or just has one file in it, and a student that's been accused of AI misuse, you can kind of say, well, I haven't seen that the student's work has improved over time. I just see a lot of static text that looks like it came straight from ChatGPT. I think this is a very important table for a supervisor to show their students. Know the big words, focusing on, suggest, reports, highlighted, however, little is known about. They're little connective tissue words that work very, very well in pulling together a literature review. And there's examples there on the right hand side. So if you ever, for instance, want to show critical engagement, these are the terms you would use here. And then you can see it there in action. This paper synthesizes diverse perspectives to develop a comprehensive understanding of the issue. Stand on those shoulders, okay? Use other people's theses as templates. This is why I always say, don't just give them a load of books and say, this is the standard. That is not the standard. The dissertation is the standard, so show them other people's thesis. Okay? Use them to see how others organize their chapters, present themes, and synthesize sources. Note how transitions, citations, and critiques are written. Observe the tone and academic style. People do say, well, can I use a doctoral dissertation? Yeah, of course. That's of a higher quality, and there's a higher standard attached to that. I do see frequently students use doctoral dissertations, and I agree with that. People should use doctoral dissertations for bolstering their literature review. Now, don't copy the text, analysis, or references directly. That's plagiarism. I have a whole video on that, we'll get to it. Assume the thesis is flawless, okay? So always critically evaluate how well it was written. It's very easy for someone to pick up a dissertation and think, well, this is true. To a point, okay? We don't know the circumstances that led that thesis to be in the repository. We can assume that the mark was above 60, although sometimes a thesis is only put in the repository if it gets a first, so different universities have different standards. Mistakes happen. Maybe a supervisor let something slip through that it shouldn't have slipped through. Maybe the second marker missed it as well. So always double check. And of course the big one is, and it relates to what I just said there, relying on only one example. Compare several theses to see different approaches and also to see if the information is factually correct. Another important part is to monitor the progress and stages there. So what the requests from the students there, the different stages, and then there's some supervisor actions there that I would recommend. Very important, ask for realistic deliverables, not full drafts. So don't expect too much from your students at the beginning. Now we're just going to summarize some of the tips here in the video. So obviously the first tip is set expectations early. So as we said in the early part of the video, clarify the communication methods that work. Do you prefer email or do you prefer Zoom? Just sort that out in the beginning. There's no issues, there's no fallouts or anything like that. Explain the level of independence you expect from the student, scaffolding, independent, a blend of the two, and obviously provide a clear outline of what good progress looks like. So as I said, use other people's thesis there and help them move towards that particular structure. The second tip is create. So create a supportive environment. So be approachable and open to questions. So don't assume that the student knows everything. Obviously we're all there at one point ourselves. So just be open to that and encourage the students to discuss challenges early. There's nothing worse than a student who sort of keeps quiet because they think, I'm gonna look stupid here, or I should know this, but I forgot. And sometimes it's down to supervisor just not being a good communicator, and the student feels, I asked them that question and I didn't get enough of an answer. And sometimes that's why students rely on AI, because they can continually probe it. It doesn't get annoyed, and it did fill a gap there, unfortunately, that supervisors were not willing to fill themselves. So encourage your students to discuss challenges. I always ask my students at the beginning of every meeting, is there something in the last meeting you're unsure of? Or is there anything you want to ask me? And I always do it with a smile, because you don't want to, you can ask that question with a frown on you and it comes across completely differently. Offer reassurance during stressful phases. The data collection period is quite stressful, especially for students who are working full-time. Now, tip number 3, give constructive, actionable feedback. So be specific and point to what needs improvement. So that's the difference between destructive and constructive feedback. Destructive feedback is just saying, this literature review is terrible, it's not doing this, this, and this. Constructive feedback says the same in a nicer way, but offers actionable ways to resolve it. Prioritize the issues. Obviously, this is a major problem among supervisors. Whole meetings are being taken up talking about full stops and their absence, or the absence of commas, or just pedantic proofreading nonsense. It's 2025. As a proofreader, as a former proofreader myself, I have to acknowledge that time has moved on. That we have programs now that Microsoft Word does most of it, Grammarly, and obviously AI. So a student will get that fixed before the end. Use your time in a meeting to talk about the structure of the work, the content of the work. Don't waste time talking about formatting and proofreading issues. Now, number 4, help students develop an autonomy. As I was talking about there in my previous slides, independent feedback versus scaffolded feedback. So ask guiding questions instead of giving all the answers. Very important, promote critical thinking and ownership of the project. A lot of times the word critical or the term critical thinking is bandied about. Neither person understands what it actually means. A supervisor will just say, use critical thinking more here. What does that mean? That, like, use your own critical thinking and devise a better way of phrasing that. Monitor progress regularly. So as I talked about my dissertation management and time management, keep your meetings consistent. They don't have to be the same time or the same day every week, but keep the flow of them consistent. And don't have one great meeting and then have a second meeting talking about full stops or just giving out to them. Like myself here using these slides, use summaries or action plans to maintain clarity and recognize when a student is slipping and intervene early. That happens when you have a good relationship with your student. Don't be friends with your student, be friendly with them. And allow an environment, a safe space if you will, where the two of you can actually be honest and transparent with each other without bickering or things being taken up the wrong way. In lieu of that, be mindful of boundaries. Don't rewrite their work for them, guide them instead. And avoid taking on too much of the student's responsibility. It's a very important one as well. It's easy to have some sort of sympathy or empathy with a student. They may be working 2 or 3 jobs. They may just not get it. They might remind you of yourself back in the day. You still have to, they're not going to grow if you keep sort of mollycoddling them, okay? Or babying them. You can highlight the learning outcomes and what you expect of them in relation to each outcome. Your students are not your friends. The meetings are enough, and the emails. That's it. If you start giving someone your number, you're asking for trouble. And you're also creating an environment where the student feels like, this person is my friend. I can get away with murder. And then that's where you see the AI stuff creeping in, because there's no consequences, or there's no perceived consequences in the student's mind. So just be mindful of boundaries. As I noted there in the skeleton of the thesis, just show them what's coming down the road. So offer encouragement during setbacks and help the students navigate the literature, the methodology, and the analysis. As I say all the time, an example, a picture paints 1,000 words, and an example does it too. Show them what they're aiming for. Obviously, helping them to identify their training needs is very important, especially if they're doing quantitative and they're going to be using Excel or SPSS. It's not your goal to train them in them. You don't really have to be an expert in them. I'll get to that in my findings video about how much of an expert a supervisor should be, but you should recognize if they are limited in their skills there, and you should be able to point them towards resources like videos or training courses or even workshops that the college puts on. The last 2 tips. So model academic integrity. So ensure all research follows ethical standards and be transparent in your decisions and advice. Lead by example, and obviously prepare them for what comes next. So offer advice on publishing, conferences, and career paths. It's very important to also highlight that life does not end at the graduation, and that the skills they pick up during their dissertation do not just get cast aside at their graduation. Show them the transferable skills, talk to them about their career, their fears, and that sort of stuff. You could offer some advice. Typically you will be working in that field, or at least be an industry expert in an adjacent field. So pass on your knowledge, and obviously encourage confidence in presenting their work. They will have a presentation and a vibe at the end of it, so encourage that confidence in them and you'll see them grow. In their career, they will be expected to give presentations anyway, so it's good to start them off on the right foot. Now, as we come to the end of this video, I'm going to spotlight some videos we have coming up. The supervised and research methods is also going to talk about qualitative, quantitative, the best methods for looking after your students there. I'm going to talk about the merits of each, the limitations of each, and how to spot students who are struggling in either of those methods. Next one after that is findings and discussion video. So I'm going to be talking about how to organize the structure of that chapter, how to make sure students follow that structure. There's so many different types of structure. It's very easy for students to mix up what a findings, an analysis, and a discussion chapter or chapters should look like. After that, we have the introduction and conclusion video. So I'm just going to talk about the bookmark device, essentially. That those two chapters should talk to one another, and there's a very simple method for getting a student to hash those out pretty quickly. After that, I'm going to talk about the marking rubric, specifically Turnitin. But if you don't use Turnitin, it's still a good video, because I'll talk about how the grading system works, how to choose between the different grades, and how to take accountability, because that's very important. Like, stand by the mark you give your student. There's no point wavering over it. So that video is very good for supervisors who are worried about being too generous or too mean to a student. After that, we have plagiarism and AI generated content. So I'm going to be talking about how to spot plagiarism. Is it accidental? Is it intentional? Obviously, AI is a huge part of that. So I'm going to talk about how to spot ChatGPT, elicit, that type of stuff in someone's work. How do we assess for it? I'm going to talk about the traffic light system there. Assessment models or policies, colleges. I'm going to look at the different ones the universities have brought in. It's obviously a field I work in myself, so we'll bring in my own experience there, and I sort of give you a look at my own assessment scale that I have developed. And then the last video is Live and La Viva Voce. And that video is going to talk about how to conduct a successful Viva etiquette, what's expected of a student in the Viva. And it's obviously going to bring in stuff there about AI, because a Viva these days is our main method of detecting or sort of rooting out AI in a student's work. So I hope you'll join me for all those videos going forward.